Hello and happy holidays! My name is Emma and today I'm going to be tier ranking all of the books that I have read in 2021. I obviously have not been doing my recent reads or monthly reading wrap-ups this year just because time to make videos has gotten away from me, but I have been looking forward to doing this video all year long of me ranking every single book I have read this year. I know that tier ranking videos have gone a little out of trend, but I really like them and I thought that this would be a great way for me to share all of my thoughts in a quick, snappy manner of every book that I have read this year. I think I've read somewhere between 35 and 40 books this year so far, and I really don't believe that I'm going to finish any more by the end of December. Before we dive into the rankings, I want to give a big thank you to today's video sponsor, which is Book of the Month. Book of the Month is an online book subscription service where their team vets hundreds of books every month to bring you 5 of the best new and early releases to choose from. They cater to a wide variety of different genres and reading tastes, and they also have a risk-free skip policy, so you can skip any month at any time for any reason and you will not be charged. I've gotten a ton of amazing recommendations from Book of the Month over the years, books I never would have heard about otherwise, and I do talk about a lot of their choices that I've read this year in today's video. If you're interested in trying out Book of the Month for December, you can choose from books like Olga Dies Dreaming, which follows 2 siblings living in New York City when their estranged mother comes to stay with them after Hurricane Maria. If you're looking for a good December read, The Holiday Swap follows 2 twins who switch places in order to escape the independent struggles of their own lives. A Flicker in the Dark, a thriller that follows a teen girl who goes missing, and our main character feels it is very similar to some of the events of her past. Somebody's Daughter, a memoir following the author's experience growing up as a woman through adolescence while her father is incarcerated. And A History of Wild Places, a magical realism story centering around a man who used to be able to find missing people before he went missing himself. And Book of the Month allows you to add on other books from their collection, like The Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green, which I read this year, really loved, and we'll be talking more about later. So these are the choices for Book of the Month's December box. I personally am most excited to read A Flicker in the Dark because any thriller that follows a psychologist feels like a story that is made for me. And if you are interested in trying out Book of the Month for yourself, they are running a special promotion this month where you can get your first book for only $5 using the code JOLLY. So thank you so much to Book of the Month for sponsoring this video. So let's just dive in, and I want to explain some of the actual names of the ranking of where I'm putting all of my books. The lowest tier on here is
You're done. You're done.
And these are for the books that I have DNF'd this year. The lowest tier of books that I have completed is And if you wonder if I hate you, I do. These are clearly books that I have hated. I find nothing good in them. I don't think they've contributed anything to my life or the greater literature world. The next tier above that are for books that I feel like I can't place in any of the other tiers because I just remember nothing about them. So this TikTok sound comes from our Lord and Savior Wendy Williams.
That's what she said. And you know what? What was that? Okay. James.
Because what were these books? What happened to them? I probably can't tell you anything about what occurred. Above that, we're getting into what would probably be around a 3-star range, but the first being because these are books that either started out good and ended bad, or the concept and the premise of the book was great and the execution was just poor, and I'm what happened here? Then above that to my standard 3 stars is
it just needs a little shaping. To the salon!
Because these are books that were good and I enjoyed them, but there are distinct things that I would have changed or think that the book could have improved on. The next tier above that is
I really want some miso soup. Oh my god, miso soup!
This tier is for books that I got exactly what I wanted. It didn't blow away my expectations, it did not go under my expectations, I enjoyed it, and I got exactly what I wanted out of it. Then going on theme with my Christmassy bookshelves, we have
But that fire is delightful.
Because these were books that were just an absolute delight. And then the last and top tier, which are my favorite books of the year. My favorites are still in the delightful category, but these are the best of the best for me. and that's of course
Sorry, hoes hate me cause I'm the it girl.
So first up, we have the first book that we're actually starting off chronologically, which is The Black Kids, and this is a book set in like the 1990s in LA around the time of the riots after the unjust beating of Rodney King. And so this book I am going to put in the it just needs a little shaping rank because I did enjoy the book, but I feel like I was expecting more of it. I think that it does really speak to what I would imagine the experience of like young Black kids in LA at that time to be like, of balancing like their cultural identity with like being on the outskirts of how the media and the police and other people in LA are treating them. Definitely was not at all attached to any of the characters. There were like some plot lines specifically regarding like teenage relationships that I wasn't crazy about, but it was enjoyable nonetheless. Like it's not a bad book by any means. Then we have Queen of Volts by Amanda Foody, which is one of the books I read during my reading vlog when I had COVID. And I feel like I also want to put this one in the it needs a little shaping rank. Queen of Volts is a part of the, what is the actual series called? I always just call it the Ace of Shades series because that's the first book in the series. It's got a lot of themes of like crime and gang and mafia dynamics, but what I've always really loved about the world is, number one, the magic system is super unique and like one of the most unique YA magic systems that I've read about. I love all of the different characters and the different powers and just like the hierarchical structure of how the world works. And I also love the characters so dearly. Like this is a series where the cast really expands as the series goes on, and they are all so lovable and just like a giant family. And so it's like really comforting in that aspect for me. Queen of Volts is definitely my least favorite of the series though. I feel like the main reason is that like big loving family dynamic that I had in the first two books kind of dissipated after the events of the ending of book 2. Like the main couple is like at odds, and therefore like their individual like gangs and friend circles are at odds. And I just didn't love all of the like relationships and choices of the main characters that I previously loved so much. It just also like had the least interesting storyline. This is one that like the plot actually could go into maybe we got lost in translation, because the idea of like everyone, like 25 people in this world being sent into this like vicious game of chance where the players bet their lives is really fascinating, but the storyline of it and the execution was a little boring, and it just wasn't as big and as exciting as I thought it would be. Then we have Maybe You Should Talk to Someone by Lori Gottlieb, and this is a nonfiction book written by a therapist, and it's like a memoir of her kind of balancing like her work with clients and the experiences she's had with specific cases over the years, what she has learned from them. But also the start of the book begins with her going through a very unexpected, tragic breakup that has really informed her work as a therapist, and she begins seeing her own therapist who is a little quirky and unconventional. So as someone who is a therapist, this was a fabulous, fabulous book for me. I loved reading from the perspective of like a more seasoned therapist. I feel like I learned a lot in terms of like interventions and things that I can apply to my own work as a therapist, but it was also very humanizing. Like Lori Gottlieb has great humor and raw honesty that I really appreciated seeing. So this is definitely a book that is going in the It Girl category. Like this is one of the first books I read this year, and I knew that it would be one of my absolute favorites. Then we have Blood and Honey by Shelby Mahurin, and this is the second book in the Serpent and Dove series, which like y'all know that I absolutely loved. The story is set in like a 16th century Parisian fantasy world. The main plot around the series is that a witch and a witch hunter are forced into like an unexpected marriage, and the witch hunter does not know that his wife is a witch. So I loved Serpent and Dove. It was one of my favorite books of the year when it first came out, and I like became a massive Shelby Mahurin fan from that moment on. I'm so excited to read anything else that she puts out in the future, and to also read the last book in this series, Gods and Monsters. But I really, really loved Blood and Honey, so I'm going to put it in the delightful category because it was just a really enjoyable read. That one is also in my COVID reading vlog if you want to hear like more of my thoughts on it. Serpent and Dove is another series that I think has a great magic system in this world. Magic always has a price, so you have to sacrifice like a memory or like some of your blood or a broken finger in order to create magic, which I think is really great. The characters also in the series are super near and dear, close to my heart. But what I loved the most about Blood and Honey is that the end of Serpent and Dove is like really dark and traumatic for our characters. So it's all about them kind of fighting for their lives and moving on and trying to heal from this trauma together. I think it was an absolutely fantastic sequel. There are so many sequels out there that suffer from that second book syndrome, but Blood and Honey really takes the entire story to a different level. It is more intense. It has some really exciting, like fun scenes. And also, like, we end off on another major cliffhanger, and I have no clue how the third book is going to pan out. So I'm really happy I read Blood and Honey, and I have high hopes that Gods and Monsters will be just as exciting as the previous two books. Then we have A Beautifully Foolish Endeavor. And so this is the sequel to An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green, and I really, really loved the first book in this duology. I read it in another reading vlog that you can check out. It was just so fun and interesting. It was like the perfect blend of like contemporary real world with a touch of like science fiction, which is like my favorite type of sci-fi to read. A Beautifully Foolish Endeavor, on the other hand, was a sequel that I feel the world did not need whatsoever. There is nothing about A Beautifully Foolish Endeavor that I liked more or even like equally as the past book. It was all a major letdown for me. The focus of this book goes to some of the side characters, and I just really didn't care to hear from their perspective. If you liked An Absolutely Remarkable Thing, I do not feel you need to read A Beautifully Foolish Endeavor. I don't feel like any of my like burning questions were answered in a satisfying way, and I kind of wish that I didn't read it. So I feel like I might put it in the like I hate you section, just because like it was not an enjoyable read. I wish I did not spend my time reading it. Then we have City of Heavenly Fire, which truthfully I have no memory of reading this year. That makes me think that I should put it in the what was that category, because I have no memory of reading it this year whatsoever. Even though like my instinct is to put it into the It Girl category because I love City of Heavenly Fire so much, and it is like a huge part of my identity is the Mortal Instruments series. But for this particular year, I don't think it would be honest to put it anywhere else. Clearly, I remember everything that happened in this book with like a really great memory, but I just have absolutely no recollection of it touching my mind space over the last year. Don't tell Cassandra Clare, please. So next up, we have Dial A for Aunties. It is a story of a Asian American girl who is a part of like this wedding business with all of her mom and aunties. And so what happens at the beginning of the book is like she accidentally kills someone and brings it home to like her mom and aunties, and like they're trying to help her with it, but they also have this like $1 million wedding upcoming the next day, and the body accidentally gets shipped to the wedding. So this book is just filled with like a lot of chaos and a lot of hilarity. It was not the most like amazing book I have ever read, but it was super enjoyable. I wasn't all that interested in the romantic storyline in this book because like at the wedding, not person included in the wedding, but like somehow related is the main character's like lost love from college, and I just don't feel like it really provided much for the story. What I really loved was like the comedy, hilarity aspect of it. The real charm of this book though comes from the strong relationship between our main character and all of the women in her life. It is a very close-knit family dynamic, and that's an aspect of stories that I love reading. I love reading about close-knit happy families. So this one I think is going to be the first in the oh my god miso soup category, just because like I went into it knowing that it wasn't going to change my life or be like the most amazing book I have ever read, but I really, really enjoyed it, and I feel like it fulfilled exactly what I needed it to. Then next up, we have Honey Girl. This was actually on one of my most anticipated books of the year, and actually every single book for the first time ever that actually got published from my most anticipated books is on this list because I made an effort to read them all, which I'm really proud about. So Honey Girl follows a Black like 23-year-old woman who has just finished her PhD, and she is feeling incredibly burnt out understandably, right? The main character, who is like always done right and what she needs to do for her entire life, goes to Las Vegas with her friends to celebrate finishing her PhD, and she accidentally ends up drunk marrying a woman who's a total stranger to her. So what happens is she ends up deciding to go to New York for the summer and like meet and get to know her wife before they like annul the marriage. So I wanted to love Honey Girl so badly. Like I thought this was going to be on like my It Girl tier. I was really rooting for it, but the execution did not satisfy me in the way I was hoping. There's a lot of great themes in this book, don't get me wrong. Like again, like the family dynamics, sexuality, because like there's so many queer characters in this book and like different identities, which I loved. And I think one of my favorite parts of it is the like mental health and therapy themes that get included near the end, and also this like overarching theme of like determining what you want to do in life and like following those dreams instead of doing what you were told. Like the thematic elements of the book, great. Everything else, super underwhelming, unfortunately. A big thing that I hate in books is when a romance is like too perfect, especially when the like love interest is just like flawless. Like everything they do is like wonderful and quirky and special, and like they just have no flaws. I can't tell you how much I hate a love interest that has no flaws. And like, it's a romance book. Like, although there are great themes throughout it, the romance is really like a centric part of the story. So it tainted a lot of it for me. And I feel like I also just like wasn't a big fan of like the writing and the plot decisions that were made. And the moment that I really got into this book was finally when some like real severe conflict happened. Like, I feel like for the first 3/4 of the book, there was like not enough conflict for me. It was like very happy-go-lucky. Everything's great, and then shit hits the fan, and it was wonderful. Like, I really liked the ending of this book. So this is definitely like perfectly fits into the maybe we got lost in translation tier, because you had so many good things going for you, but in the end, like, we just didn't match up. Like, we did not like swipe left on each other on Tinder. It just wasn't happening that way. But it was still a really good book, and I feel like a lot of people other than myself would and did enjoy it. Oof. Then we have If I Disappear, another book that was on my most anticipated of the year. So this is a story about a woman who loves true crime podcasts, and her favorite true crime podcaster goes missing. So she takes it upon herself to go to like the last place that she was seen and investigate. This book was trash. It was one of the worst mystery thrillers I have ever read in my entire life, and I am so disappointed. The characters, horrific. Super one-dimensional, no depth whatsoever, and especially the main character is infuriating. Like, everything bad that happens to her in this book is her fault. Maybe just like, don't go looking for a missing person you have never met and like take on that responsibility for yourself, and then like you won't end up at like trapped at a ranch in the middle of nowhere with no one you know. The plot was super boring. Like, there was no excitement, there was no like twists and turns. It was all of this buildup to a very unsatisfying answer to the mystery. A very, very bad book. Don't read it. Like, I am never one to be like, don't waste your time with this book. I'm usually like, I didn't like it, I thought it was really bad, but like I can see why other people would like it. Overall, this book was just like terrible in all aspects. Don't read it. So clearly it is going in the I hate you tier. So then we have This Close to Okay, another most anticipated book of the year. I really made an effort this year, guys. I was so excited for This Close to Okay. I feel like that, like, when I say I was so excited, it like gives you an idea of what I'm gonna say. I was really excited about This Close to Okay because it follows a therapist who comes across a man who is like on the edge of a bridge about to attempt suicide, and she stops him and convinces him to like come into her home so that they can talk and like save him, but she does not want to reveal to him that she's a therapist and like this is what she does for her job. I had really high hopes for this book. I expected it again to be on that It Girl tier because I was like, this book is made for me. So this book is going in the You're Done category because I DNF'd it. This was like my first DNF of the year, and I really do want to go back and finish this book at some point. I would like to start over from the beginning and give it a second chance because it was not that I didn't like it enough to give it another chance, and I do hope that it would be better in the end, but I was struggling through it like halfway through and I just like needed to give up and read something else. The main thing I didn't like about this book is just like the many crossing boundaries of these characters, because it's actually told from both characters' perspectives, and like I feel like maybe like crossing boundaries is kind of, and dishonesty especially, is like woven into the premise of the book, but I just did not like the choices that these characters were making. Like the male main character like goes through and like sends emails from her email, and I am like, this is so fucked up. Like I am not enjoying this whatsoever. So that just left like a really bad taste in my mouth, and the story itself was not as interesting to like uphold after that like big blow to it. I had high hopes. It didn't pan out. Maybe I'll get back to it in the future, but I also like would not be upset if I never read it again. I just like really wanted to like this book, so I would be willing to give it another chance at a different time. Then we have You Love Me by Caroline Kepnes, and this is the third book in the You series. So in this book, it kind of reverts back to the origins of the first story of You, where Joe moves to a completely different city and finds himself becoming obsessed with another woman, as he does. To give an overview for those of you who have been following my journey with the series, I really enjoyed the first book of You. It was insanity, it was fun, it was funny, like it was great. I had a great time with that book. Hidden Bodies, the sequel, is one of my least favorite books like I have ever read in the entire world. It removed everything that was great about You and left like garbage. And so what I really liked about You Love Me is, yes, the premise is similar, but it really goes back to like all of the origins of the first book. It's almost like, excluding like the end where the stories match up, you could almost like pretend like Hidden Bodies never happened, which is what I would prefer. That said, it was not as great as You. Like You itself, like I really feel like maybe it should have just been a standalone and then had like the extended seasons. Is it even possible for me to really like explain why I don't like it as much as You? It just wasn't as good. Like this is just one of those situations where I don't feel like I can articulate how it wasn't as good. The new character that like Joe is in love with is not as interesting as Beck or Love for sure. So that's probably part of it. And like the adventure of like all of the situations that Joe gets himself into also is not as interesting. I feel like this one is like an even split between Oh My God Miso Soup and It Just Needs a Little Shaping, but I gotta choose one and I don't want it to be like in the middle. Maybe we'll leave it there for now and then I'll come back and decide later. Ooh, so then we have The Project by Courtney Summers. I was really excited for this book because I loved Sadie by Courtney Summers. So The Project really intrigued me because it is all about a teen girl whose older sister gets like caught up in a cult. And so she teams up with another man who believes that the cult killed his son to try and like infiltrate and expose them. So this book is like a prime example of We Got Lost in Translation. Great premise. Like I felt like this was also going to be like a favorite book of the year. I really thought that I would love it as much as Sadie, and it just did not pan out that way. The beginning was really great, and I want to like explain where things changed without it being too spoilery. Essentially, like the characters' perspective and motivation and choices change at a certain point in the book that make like a big shift in the tone of the story and where it goes. I don't want to be spoilery. If you've read the book, you probably know the part I'm talking about. I do feel like it was a smart decision in terms of like exploring like how deceptive and like all-consuming cults can be and how like people actually find themselves in cults. Like that part of the story, like what it represented was great, but it reduced all of the interest and excitement for me. So then we have Leave the World Behind. And this is a book that I wanted to read because it takes place in Long Island, which is where I live and where I have lived my entire life. So this is a thriller about a family that like goes out to the Hamptons for like a weekend away, and there is a big blackout and two people show up at the front door of the house that they are renting saying that they are the owners. And unfortunately, Leave the World Behind is like the lowest of the low. Again, one of the worst books I have ever read. The premise of this book, great. Like the idea of like renting and being in a home that is not yours, having the owner show up and them like not being the owners is great and like total fear-inducing material. And the book just like didn't even go in the other direction. Like it flew all the way over to the other side of the world and like was not at all what the book was promoting. It has this like weird sci-fi dystopian twist, but that is still rooted in like our reality. And I still feel like I don't fully understand it. It just veered completely off course in a direction that was bad. I absolutely hated this book. I did not like it. I think it was really, really bad. Then we have Concrete Rose by Angie Thomas. And I know that this is a book that I liked. It was nowhere near as good as The Hate You Give, in my opinion. I think it made a lot of great commentary on like what it means to be a teenage dad, to be involved in the world of like gangs and drug dealing, but also like to want more for yourself. But I don't remember anything that happened in this book. I know that I liked it. Like I came away from it being like, that was a good read. I'm glad that I read it. But I read it in like January or February maybe, and no thoughts, no brain, not happening. I can't remember a single thing. It goes into the what was that category. Oh, this is an easy one. So next we have Chain of Iron. I have a reading vlog if you would like to follow my journey, of course, of reading Chain of Iron, the second book in the Last Hour series. And of course, like without a question, I loved it so much. It goes in the It Girl category for sure. Chain of Iron is by no means like a flawless book. Like if I was rating it on the 5-star rating scale, I would give it a 4.5. What I love about Chain of Iron is like number one, like the Shadowhunter world, like of course near and dear to my heart, favorite literary world to ever read in, but the characters of Chain of Iron, which I feel like everyone says, is just like, they're wonderful and perfect. It's a large cast full of very unique, realistic, grounded characters, and they are just so fun to read about. And the drama, oh my gosh, the drama in this book is so good, especially the ending. Like the ending of Chain of Iron is something I never expected. It was so good. I really liked the mystery aspect of it as well, because there are some Shadowhunter books that like are like a mix between that like fantasy mystery, and there are others that are just like straight fantasy adventure. So I really liked the mystery aspect of this book, and again, that is something that I did not predict to turn out, but I had a lot of fun reading it. Like Chain of Iron is a great memory from this year. I should go rewatch my vlog because it was just a great time. So I loved it. I'm super happy I read it, and I cannot wait for the last book in this series. Oh my gosh, it cannot come soon enough. So then we have Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Melinda Lowe, and this was also a most anticipated of the year, clearly. This is a story that takes place in the 1950s of San Francisco, and it follows a young teen girl who is coming to terms with her sexuality, that she likes women, and she has a friend at school that she becomes close to and introduces her to this secret lesbian bar called the Telegraph Club. I loved this book. I think this is a fantastic book, and I want all people who are interested in more queer fiction to read it. It goes in the It Girl category, absolutely. Like, it was just such a great time. I really, really enjoyed it. It's sweet, it's cute, it's got like a really huge, like heart-sucking punch at a point that changes the course of the story in the end, which, you know me, I love conflict. I love like making the characters like depressed and sad and heartbroken. It makes for great content. I did not really love the flashbacks about the main character's parents, of like their love story and their journey coming to America. I'm a big person where I am like, if it's not like a necessarily like a dual timeline book with characters I'm going to care about in both timelines, I don't like flashbacks, and I wish they weren't there. I was like very, very engaged with the present story, and I just didn't really care for the flashbacks, but it was interesting and enjoyable to read. Overall, a great book. If you have not read it yet, I highly recommend. Then we have Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Another most anticipated, of course, because Taylor Jenkins Reid is one of my favorite writers. I feel like we all know that Malibu Rising goes in the It Girl category. Like, clearly, how could it be anywhere else? Another reading vlog I have. I feel like if you have not heard it from me, you have heard elsewhere what Malibu Rising is about. It takes place in 1980s Malibu, California, and it follows this group of 4 siblings who are all like famous and accomplished in their own ways, whether they are a surfer, a photographer, a model. and every year they have an annual end of summer party together. And the story takes place over the course of one full day, like 24 hours, when the party is like leading up to it happening. And by morning time, Malibu is up in flames as a result of this party. Another large aspect of the story is this is one that does have flashbacks to the parents' experiences and their love story, which I actually really enjoyed. I think it's just because Taylor Jenkins Reid is a master of writing historical fiction, and like I will love anything that she reads. But yeah, this is a great book. I always say that it is not my favorite Taylor Jenkins Reid. Out of the 3 books I have read, it is my least favorite, but it is different in a way of like I have not stopped thinking about Malibu Rising since I read it. I am like thoroughly obsessed. Love the family dynamics between all of the different siblings, their individual storylines, and also how it relates to like the parents and like their entire history. A lot of the themes are about like belonging and finding yourself and what family really means to you. And it was just great. It was all around great, entertaining, emotional, like really, really emotional in the best way. And it's fabulous. And I love it. And I can't stop thinking about it. We have Under the Whispering Door, another most anticipated book of the year. Under the Whispering Door is a new book from TJ Klune, who is the author of The House in the Cerulean Sea, which is one of my favorite books of last year that I loved and will love forever. And so I was super, super excited for Under the Whispering Door, which follows a lawyer who has just been like a bad, money-hungry, terrible person for all of his life, and one morning he dies. And so the story follows him in the afterlife, where he meets the like ferryman who takes souls on to like their next destination. And when he gets there, he's like, I don't want to die, like I haven't lived like my best life. And so the main character and Hugo the ferryman set out to like live a lifetime in a week, I feel is the tagline that I've always gotten from this book. I was really enjoying this book, but unfortunately it is one that is going in the you're done tier because I have not finished it. This is definitely a book I do want to finish at some point. Like I really, really do. But it also just like was not panning out to be what I expected. Like I expected a big story of like adventures across the world and like major interactions and character growth happening. And as I am reading, I am discovering I'm like halfway through and like we haven't left this tea house. And so then I get lunch with one of my friends, Megan, who has finished the book, and she's like, oh no, they never leave the tea house. And I'm like, what? I feel like I should have expected this because The House on the Cerulean Sea also does not really leave the like orphanage that they're at. But I feel like this book like hyped it up to be like really adventurous and big, and like we are literally in a small tea house for the entirety of the story. Yeah, as much as I love the characters, I see the character growth happening, I see the relationship between Hugo and the main character growing, but it just didn't keep me as I kept going on. It just couldn't keep my engagement, and I definitely left my motivation behind when I found out that like, aha, we are never leaving this tea house. It definitely has like a similar whimsicality vibe as The House in the Cerulean Sea, but in my opinion it just does not compare whatsoever. So hopefully I will finish it at some point and get back to it and enjoy it. All right, so next up we have One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston, which also is in the Malibu Rising vlog. I actually vlogged like a good number of books this year. So One Last Stop is very obviously going into the sorry hoes hate me because I'm the it girl tier. Although Chain of Iron, Malibu Rising, and maybe a few others on this list are like my top books of the year, like One Last Stop is still up there. I'm just saying like it's not my favorite book of the year, but it is absolutely like I think like the best book I read this year. One Last Stop got a ton of hype, understandably, over the summer. It follows a girl who moves to New York City, and she ends up getting a crush on a girl that's like always on the same subway as her, and she discovers in them getting to know each other that Jane is like straight out of like 1970s Brooklyn, and she is like trapped on the subway in some sort of like time, space, thingamabobber going on. I loved One Last Stop. I'm a huge fan of Casey McQuiston's work. I feel like they are like so great at writing books that are like perfect contemporary romances for me. I feel like they really understand like the type of like writing for young millennials that I love. their humor and their writing and the plot, everything just aligns really well with what I like to read. I really loved all of the characters in this novel. I feel like I very often, like, I love the main characters and the side characters, like, I just don't care about. But everyone in this book, like, had a lot of personality, a lot of different parts to their character. They felt very real and grounded, which is important to me in contemporary novels. And one of the things I was a little nervous about going into One Last Stop was how this like science fiction fantasy-ish element was going to be handled, because I feel like a lot of times when it's not necessarily magical realism, but there is a magical aspect in a contemporary novel, it doesn't get explained well. It's kind of like, let's just accept this as like fact. And so I really liked that not only was it just like satisfying about how that was handled and like why Jane is trapped on the subway and how things get resolved, but it was just like, it was unexpected. I couldn't predict how it turned out, and especially like the ending. Like, I thought that I had how the book was gonna end figured out, and it was surprising and enjoyable. And I just like, I have nothing but good things to say about One Last Stop. I think that like it checks every box for me in what I love in a book, and it's just one of the best well-constructed novels that I've read this year. So I love it, and I'm super happy that I read it. Then we have People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. I read this because like I just wanted like a fun summary read, and this one was like everywhere over the summer. And this one also goes right into the what was that? Oh, okay section, because I don't remember a single damn thing about this book. What I do remember is that it was a little underwhelming. Like, I was not at all like engaged or attached to the plot of the story, and definitely not the characters. Like, I gave no shits about these characters whatsoever. I don't remember their names. I don't really remember what they like. I remember like bits and pieces of this book, but not enough to say like I have articulate thoughts on it. This is a book where I also did like the flashbacks. It was very important to the story because it's all about these two friends who used to go on all of these vacations together, and then they had a falling out, and I think the main character is like wanting to have this like last-ditch vacation with this person, and so it's about like the kind of calamity of being stuck with somebody that like you don't really know anymore but used to be incredibly close to, and it's balanced with flashbacks of like their adventures from other vacations. So I did like that aspect of it. Did not care at all for the romance in this book. Oh my god. I hate when like I love characters as friends and it's like clearly a friends to lovers book, but I don't feel their chemistry as romantic partners at all. I am like, I wish that this was just a story about friendship. I think that in many cases, especially this book, like it just would have made the book stronger. So I'm glad that like a lot of people liked it, but I just don't really have an opinion on it. And if I do, it was like underwhelming. Then I have The Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green. And this is John Green's first nonfiction work. And it's a collection of essays that I find really interesting because it's kind of like all of the topics of the essays are just like, I can't describe them in any other way other than like just topics involved in our world. Like there are certain like historical events and happenings, there are different inventions, there are like examples of things or like the invention of air conditioning or these particular cave paintings or like a pandemic and sports. Like it really spans like humanity, culture, and how we interact in our world throughout history. And another interesting element of it is that the first essay is about like the 5-star rating scale that many of us use to rate books and items on websites and whatnot. And so each essay at the end receives a rating on the 5-point rating scale. I loved this book. Like, I was really surprised with how much I enjoyed it. I love John Green as a nonfiction writer. Like, if he never writes YA fiction again, I'll be super content with it because The Anthropocene Reviewed is 100% my favorite John Green book. John and Hank Green, like, I just feel are built to share, like, information with the world. Like, they're both so good at it, and so it was really enjoyable to not only, like, have this wealth of new information about many things that I never really knew about. I listened to the audiobook, which is narrated by John Green, and it was also a really enjoyable experience. So I just have like really wonderful thoughts about The Anthropocene Reviewed. I don't know, maybe I'll put also this in between like delightful and sorry hoes hate me because I'm the it girl, because it's like both to me. Like I can't fully choose between one or the other. Next up is We're Okay by Nina LaCour, and this is a book that I had been wanting to read because it was one of the like older YA fiction stories that was really prominent in being like one of the first big like LGBT books, especially about like women who love women. Unfortunately though, again, very similar to City of Heavenly Fire, no memory of reading this book whatsoever. Like, I don't even think I could tell you the plot of it. Oh, I do remember this book. Oh my gosh, wow. Reading the synopsis just gave me a lot of memories, but I'm absolutely still putting it on the what was that okay tier, because if you ask me tomorrow, I may not remember it. Oh, but now I can tell you like why it goes to that section and what I did actually think about it, because now I have memories. We're Okay was just like a little boring maybe. It's all about this girl who like has gone through a really tragic loss, and she like went away to school, and her prior friend who she had a like romantic relationship with comes to visit her for a couple of days. It was just like really low key, like not a lot happened, and I feel like there was a lot of good subtext in the book. Like that's one thing I will say about it, is like I really enjoyed watching this dynamic unfold, kind of similar to people we meet on vacation, of like, we are people who knew each other and had feelings for each other a long time ago, and now we're being confronted when things are different. There was just no wow factor to me. Like, so many themes I liked in that book about like loss and grief and friendship and love and sexuality, but it just didn't really do it for me. So obviously like this is staying in this tier just because like it's not going to be one that was memorable at all for me. Then I have An Emotion of Great Delight by Tahara Mafi, which was also one of my most anticipated books of the year because I really enjoyed Tahara's like first contemporary release, which was A Very Large Expanse of Sea. And I initially had thought that because the titles are similar that it was like a sequel, but I found out before I read it that it's two entirely different stories, which is fine. What I do know about this book is that the main character has also gone through a lot. Like, her brother has died, her father is dying, her mother is incredibly depressed, and she is just like trying to survive. And so this is another one, unfortunately, going in the You're Done category. I can't believe that's all most anticipated of the years. Oh my gosh. This is a book that I liked enough. Like, I'm not gonna say that I didn't like this book. It also just like felt very like small, not in terms of like the issues being discussed in this book were unimportant, but it's like micro level. Like, it just follows this one girl, it's a coming of age story, and there's not a lot of plot to it in my opinion. I just felt that the story was very slow paced and it wasn't really moving along at the point that I stopped in this story, which was like maybe a little bit more than halfway through. Just like I felt like not a lot had happened. Again, really important themes of like family, of what it means to be growing up as a Muslim in America, and also about like her own grief and frustration and her own like mental health that is struggling from all of these situations. So similar to like When I DNF a Book, just because like I lost the motivation to finish it at the time, or it wasn't the right time for me to read the book. I would like to finish it at some point, but compared to the other two books currently on this tier, the motivation is much, much lower. Like, I would be okay never finishing this book, which is a shame because I love Tahara Mafi and I really loved her last contemporary book, but this one just like wasn't the one for me. Then we have Daisy Jones and the Six, which I have actually read like 1.75 times this year. I listened to the audiobook early this year because it's me. I'm a rereader. I love rereading books, especially like a short one like Daisy Jones that I can fly through in just a couple of days. But my boyfriend and I had also like, we've gone on like a few like short road trips over the year, and we have been listening to Daisy Jones because Jake has also read Daisy Jones and loves it. So we've been listening to it together, and we have like maybe like an hour or two left. Like, we don't have a ton left. So it's just gonna be reserved for the next time we go driving together. You all know how much I love Daisy Jones. Like, that's just like a given with me. It's one of my favorite books of all time. I love the musical element. I love all of the characters. They feel so real. Like, I cannot believe this band is fictional and all of these people don't exist. I love the love and friendship and family and addiction and like Hollywood glamour of it all. It is just a great story all around. I know that like people with Daisy Jones, you either love it, you hate it, or you don't really have an opinion on it, but I love this book so dearly. It is like going to be a part of my life for the entire future. Like, I love this book. It'll always have a presence in my life. So like, how could it not go in my top tier. Next we have The Girls Are All So Nice Here, and this is a book that I really randomly picked up. So this is a dual timeline story that takes place in the present following a woman who is going to her college reunion, and she has been very removed from her college experience because of some really bad things that happened her freshman year, so she hasn't kept in contact with anyone. She's feeling anxious about going back. And then in the past, we follow her college experience throughout that freshman year of her like being in a new place, having to make friends, trying to find herself, and also the events that led up to that like really big event that they call like dorm doom. Like the two stories obviously merge in the present, and there's like someone there at the college reunion that is kind of like targeting her because of her role in this big event. It was a really, really enjoyable thriller though. Like this is gonna go in the delightful category because I didn't have expectations, but it definitely like went above what I was expecting from like a random thriller to pick up. It was super engaging. Like balancing reading with my work schedule lately has been really tough because I just don't have the energy to read a lot of the times, but I like could not stop myself from reading this book. It was a great thriller because there were a lot of twists and turns that I did not expect. That's like a good marker of a great thriller to me. There were definitely some interesting themes about like the downsides or like the like not pretty aspects of womanhood. Like a lot of internalized misogyny and fat phobia is present, but it's not like the author is condoning it. Like it's to forward the story and explain what it is like to grow up as a young woman in the early 2000s. So like the main character is definitely unlikable, and I don't think it's a character that's like unlikable but you still like. Like I didn't like the main character, but she was a really good narrator to read from. I will say that there's definitely trigger warnings for this book in terms of like suicide and sexual assault. I feel like it gets really graphic at points, but like I'm somebody who's really comfortable and I like graphic thrillers, so it's important to note that when I talk about it. But I really loved it. I really, really enjoyed it. And yeah, I'm happy it was like one of those like books that I randomly pick up and turned out to be a really great read. Ooh, similar, we have 56 Days. So this is a book that I got through Book of the Month, and I had never heard of it before, but I was immediately intrigued because it is the first book that I have heard of that takes place during the COVID pandemic. So the book takes place like right at the beginning of the first lockdown in Dublin, and it follows this couple that just met right before everything shut down, and they decide to like become lockdown buddies and move in with each other for like the 2 weeks that everyone thought was only going to be 2 weeks. And so it's also a dual timeline story where like the main story of like what I feel like people are most interested in follows the couple from when they meet to like the 56 days of their relationship throughout the pandemic, and then the present takes place 56 days after that, and it follows like the police and investigators as someone is found dead in the apartment that they were living in. I feel like has to go in the It Girl category because it like blew my mind. I feel like this was absolutely the biggest surprise of 2021 for me. So many twists and turns. I could not predict a single thing that was happening, and as soon as I felt like I had a handle on the direction the story was going in, it would completely veer off course. And then like we're getting to the end and you think that like, okay, like I figured it all out, like another one happens and it changes everything, and it's so good. It was also really cool to just like explore like and revert back to like the early pandemic days, because although we're still obviously suffering through the pandemic, like the first lockdown is a very unique period of time that I don't know that we will ever experience again. So it was really cool to like take a reflection back on what it was like 2 years ago in the world. And it's just really interesting to follow these two perspectives of not just like well, technically three, not like the investigator, but you follow the perspectives of both the woman and the man in their relationship, and they both have like very different views of their relationship, different motivations, and like finding it out along with all of the information that is informing those motivations was just really fascinating to me. This was another one, like The Girls Are All So Nice Here, that I just could not put down when I picked it up, and I felt like I was like screaming and yelling and like I ranted about it to friends because it was so good. So if you like thrillers, please read 56 Days. Like it's definitely one of like the biggest books I want to recommend through this video. So then we have The Silent Patient. I feel like we've had like a handful of thrillers in a row, and I was excited to read this one because I feel like this book came out last year, and like everyone was reading it and everyone loved it. So I was like, okay, like I gotta give it a chance. The Silent Patient is about a woman who supposedly killed her husband and then like never spoke again. And so it follows the perspective of a new doctor that is working with her and like trying to find out the truth of what happened. So this is a book also going in my DNF tier because I have not finished it. And once again, it's kind of like just I lost motivation to read it and finish it. I also, again, I would like to finish it someday. Will I? Who knows? I did listen to the audiobook, and audiobooks, like actually all of the ones, no, not all of the ones, 3 out of the 4 books I've DNF'd so far have been audiobooks. And that can definitely be a factor in causing me to DNF a book, because if I am just like, if I'm reading, like I have to like be engaged. If I'm listening, like I'm often like driving or doing something else. But if I'm not really feeling the book, I'll stop paying attention and I'll start like thinking while it's playing. And so that's definitely like what happened with The Silent Patient. There wasn't necessarily anything bad about it that I could identify. It just didn't hold my interest. So I would like to finish it and understand why so many people love it, but definitely not at the top of my priority list. Then we have These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong, which I feel like so many people love. So many people love this book. And I did not finish it. These Violent Delights is a different case than some of these DNFs because I did not get far into it at all. I didn't even really get through the first chapter, but I'm putting it on this list because like I tried it many, many times. Like there were a couple of times where like I tried listening to this audiobook and I started it over from the beginning, like 4 times in a row in one sitting. It is not the book for me to listen to on audiobook, but I still really, really want to read it. I think that I would love it. It's like a Romeo and Juliet like retelling with like monsters and fantasy and stuff. So it feels really up my alley, but I'm going to commit to reading it physically, and I definitely think that this will be like one of the DNFs that this will absolutely be the DNF that I like start over and read first because I'm still very, very interested in it. But I gave it a big enough attempt that I feel like it deserves a spot because I dedicated some serious time to trying to listen to it and it just didn't go well. Then we have All of Us Villains by Christine Lynn Herman and Amanda Foody. As we know, I love Amanda Foody, and I was not a big fan of The Devouring Grey by Christine Lynn Herman at all. It was definitely like one of my least favorite books of the year that I read it. So All of Us Villains, I will be candid that this is the book that I'm currently reading. I have not finished it, but I'm pretty close to the end and I will finish it before the end of the year. So I'm not at all concerned about putting it on the list, and I feel like I'm like secure enough in how I feel about this book that like whatever I put it on, I don't think that much could change in what I have left. Like it's not going, I would be surprised if it like severely disappointed me or like blew my mind in the ending. So I feel like this one is gonna get a oh my god miso soup tier because it's good. Like I feel like I'm getting what I wanted from it. This story is like a fantasy Hunger Games. Like that's the best way I can describe it. It takes place on this island that is like set in the modern world. It feels very grounded in reality. But like this particular island has like magic and like a long-standing history. That combination, that juxtaposition is really interesting to me. So in Ilvernath, which is the name of the island, there is like common magic that like everyone has access to and you can mold and create. But then there is high magic, which is like pure, unfiltered, uncontrolled magic that's really powerful. And so every generation, 7 families choose one champion who is like a teenager, and they send them into this competition that's very much like the Hunger Games, where they fight to the death, and the family of the champion gets to control the high magic of the island until the next competition. I am really enjoying this book. Like, I feel like it takes a lot for me to get interested in a high fantasy. It usually takes like an author that I already love, like Amanda Foody, or like the premise like has to really like shake me. Like I have to really be interested in it. But high fantasy is not a genre that I touch very often. And so I have been really enjoying it. I'm not crazy about the magic system. The way it works is like you have to craft the magic into like a spell stone, and then you like wear or carry the spell stone, and then you are able to practice the spells that are crafted into the stone. So it's not like, oh, you have a spell stone, like you can do whatever you want. Like there are particular spells and enchantments and charms that are put into the spell stones to use. So I guess when I put it that way, it's actually a little bit more interesting. I just feel like maybe like the way that it all works isn't as clear to me, and that's why I'm not as interested in it as like some other magical systems. And it also has like a pretty large cast of perspectives. I want to say there's at least 4 points of view out of the 7 champions, and they are all very unique. Like they have very different motivations between like being the underdog who becomes really powerful, being the champion of the family that like always wins the competition, wanting to destroy the competition from within. So that's all really interesting. The thing that I don't love about it is number one, there was a lot of info dumping in the beginning, like paragraphs and pages of explanations of how the world works, and it's entirely possible to explain that to readers without info dumping. So that's always a pet peeve of mine. Additionally, the pace of this book is so slow. It's like well over 100 pages until we actually start the competition. And it's like, I'm reading this because I want to know what happens in the competition. I understand the need for build up and setup and exposition, but it was like a lot. I feel like it definitely could have been condensed. And the actual competition has not been all that interesting because it takes so long for the first person to die. And like, they're all interacting and talking and like switching between alliances. And I'm like, y'all are here to kill each other. Like, not that I like want to say or present that I'm like, I want to read about kids getting murdered, but it's just providing very little conflict. Like all of the conflicts that everyone's going through are like really individual, and I am like, I want to see y'all battle and fight each other. So yeah, definitely some like things about this book that irk me. So I feel like in some, like if it was like a slightly different book, I would put it in the it needs a little shaping, but I am enjoying it enough that I feel like it's like, oh my god, miso soup. Like I'm getting what I wanted from this book. I wanted like a fantastical Hunger Games, and it's good enough for me. Then we have The Box in the Woods by Maureen Johnson, and this is it's not a spin-off, it's not a like 4th book in the Truly Devious series. It's a little different. Like it's technically the 4th book, but the trilogy of Truly Devious that I talk about so much is one completed storyline. And The Box in the Woods takes place after with the same characters, but it's an entirely new mystery. And the mystery is also condensed into that one book. So The Box in the Woods follows Stevie from the Truly Devious series after she has solved the cold case disappearance of the century. And so like she's 18 and like very well revered in the like true crime world now. So she gets invited to like pose as a camp counselor at a summer camp where in the 70s there was a group of like 4 teens that were murdered and nobody ever knows who did it. So I really liked The Box in the Woods. It felt very true to the like essence of Truly Devious, which is a series that I love so dearly. If you have not read the trilogy, like start there. It's great. And I don't think you necessarily have to read the trilogy of Truly Devious in order to enjoy The Box in the Woods. If you are ever planning on reading it, read the trilogy first because it is connected, but the storylines have nothing to do with each other than the same characters and it happening after those events. The Box in the Woods just was not as exciting as Truly Devious, and I just don't think it was like as well constructed as a mystery. I also don't like that it was condensed into one book. Like I get it because it just takes place over the summer, and Truly Devious is like different like years and months of like being at school. The way the mystery is revealed is very much like classic in my mind. Like I feel like a classic part of mysteries is like the investigator like ends it by like going through how they figured everything out and all the events and like figuring out who did the murder. But I just prefer to find it out across time, kind of like 56 days, and the girls are also nice here. I don't like Stevie just like standing up and explaining the last bits of information. I want to find those out and like piece the mystery together on my own. I think it would have benefited from being like 2 books, and it just wasn't like the greatest. But I also want to put it in the oh my god miso soup section because like I can admit when a book is not like amazing and has like construction issues and still like fully enjoy it, because like my enjoyment of a book always takes priority for me. I read for pleasure, I read for enjoyment, so even if I can recognize the flaws that a book has, what's most important to me of how I view the book is how much I enjoyed it. And I really enjoyed diving back into the world of Truly Devious, getting to see these characters, having Maureen Johnson's mystery writing. So it was overall an enjoyable experience, and I feel like I got what I wanted out of it, if not a little more. Maybe it should go in between, but I just love Truly Devious so much, so I feel good about keeping it at my miso soup tier. And so the last book of 2020 that I am reading, and I am currently reading, but I have read this book many, many, many times, so I can confidently place it on this tier list, and that is The Afterlife of Holly Chase by Cynthia Han. I really had a moment on like December 1st where I was like, oh my god, like, it's December. I can read The Afterlife of Holly Chase. The Afterlife of Holly Chase is all about a girl named Holly Chase who is visited by 3 ghosts on the night of Christmas, and they, you know, go through the whole Christmas Carol spiel of showing her past, her present, and her future. So what happens after is, instead of like dying and going on to wherever souls go to die, she is recruited as a part of this organization called Project Scrooge that recreates a Christmas Carol every year for a person that they deem a Scrooge in order to change them, because if they change their ways, they will have a positive impact on the world. And so the present story takes place like 5 years after Holly has died, and she's been working at Project Scrooge, but this year is different because it is the first time that there is a Scrooge who is also 17, and he's hot. So I really love The Afterlife of Holly Chase because it is that interesting blend of like being a retelling, but it's more of what I consider a remix, because the story of A Christmas Carol is not like woven in between and rewritten through the new story, but like A Christmas Carol exists in this world. It's constantly referenced as like a Christmas famous story. So I think that it's like interesting how they do it compared to like a strict retelling. It's also definitely one of those cases where like the fact that they can like do like magical type things is not really explained, but like it kind of works for this book. I just love this book because it is so fun and entertaining. Like it makes me feel fuzzy and warm, and I just like always, I feel like I'm in 2017 every time I read this book. It like goes back to the first time I read it, and like there's never a moment where I'm listening to this book and I don't enjoy it. Like there was one year where I read it twice in December just because I could not get enough. And I love the relationship between Holly and Ethan. Like they're definitely like one of my like OTPs. I made a video about like my favorite fictional couples one year, and like I think they're just so cute and perfect together, and like it makes sense when you understand how the story ends, but they're so cute, and they just, look at my face, look at my smile. I'm so excited when I talk about Holly and Ethan. Yeah, and it's just a cute story. Like it's really cute. And I will admit, like for sure, like it is like not a sophisticated novel. Like the writing style is amateur at a lot of points. Like an example I'll give is like in the beginning and the end, not really in the middle of the book, but like Holly is talking to the reader, and I hate that. I hate like being faced with the fact that I am reading a book instead of experiencing a story as it happens. So it's just not like the most like well-crafted, well-written novel ever. So like I don't want to like make it seem like I believe that, but I just love it so much. Like it's so good, it's so enjoyable. I foresee myself continuing to read it every December for a long time because it just makes me so happy. So I'm currently in the midst of my reread. I'm probably about like almost halfway through maybe, but I know that I love this book, so I'm going to put it in the delightful tier because it is absolutely delightful. So it appears I have forgotten at least one book that I read this year. There's probably a few more that got left by the wayside, but one book I did read this year is The Final Girl Support Group by Grady Hendrix. This story is a play on the trope of the final girl, the last survivor of a giant massacre, and the main character is a part of a support group for other women who have had this very unique experience. And her life is turned upside down when she discovers that someone is trying to kill off each of the final girls one by one. I picked up this book because it definitely has a lot of similarities to Final Girls by Fie Sejr, but Final Girls was just like okay for me, so I was excited to see somebody take on a similar plot. I did enjoy the Final Girl Support Group. I loved how much action there was in this story. Like there was a lot of traveling and different events, and it was very exciting. I do feel like the book could have been quite shorter. Like, as the story was going on, I was just getting like less and less interested nearing the end, and I feel like having like a shorter, more concise story would have really benefited it. I didn't really like any of the characters in this book. They are not all that likable, especially the main character, and I wasn't all that happy about how like the story ended up and the mystery of who was coming after them wrapped up. But nonetheless, like, it was an enjoyable, exhilarating read, and I'm glad that I gave it a chance. I do feel that I personally liked it more than Final Girls just for that action part of it, but they are very comparable, so I think if you liked Final Girls, you would enjoy the Final Girl support group, and if you're like me that you were just like about Final Girls, maybe you would like the Final Girl support group more. So to close out my tier ranking video, I am putting the Final Girl support group in the it just needs a little shaping tier, because I just felt like there were significant things about this book that could have been improved. So that concludes my video on tier ranking all of the books that I have read in 2021. Like I said, I don't really foresee myself picking up and completing another book by the end of this year. I'm going to stick with All of Us Villains and The Afterlife of Holly Chase. But I'm really glad I had the opportunity to like reflect back on these books and share them with you and just talk about how much I loved them or hated them. And it seems like I've got like a very interesting like, what is the word I'm looking for? Oh, come on. I have 2 science degrees. I should know. Distribution. Yes, that is it. There is a really nice like inverted bell curve distribution when you look at it. So like there's a lot that I loved, and there's like a lot that I like didn't like or DNF'd. And so I just think that's like very interesting. But yes, in the comments below, I absolutely want to know what you thought of any of these books, if we read some of the same books in 2020, or if you've read any of these before. I also want to know like what are some of your favorite and least favorite books of the year. I definitely want to know. I don't know if I'll make like a favorites of 2021 video, because like I feel like I just did that. So yeah, that is it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you soon for a new one. Bye!